alive. I continue reading out of A Lot to Remember, Lot being a particular area of France where Joan Marshall Grant travelled a lot. This was published in 1962. Joan passed in 1989, and this is chapter 12. There's a lot of reminiscences in here and also visions she had. Anyway, chapter 12, How to Play Post Office. It was in Saint-Césaire, to be exact, in the sanctum of a private bank, that I witnessed a phenomenon that, unique to me, although so rapidly have conditions changed that 4 years later it would have seemed commonplace. I watched a banker pick up the receiver of the telephone on his desk, give an Élysée number, and a moment later begin talking with his friend in Paris. I would not have been more startled if the bud in his buttonhole had instantly become a rose in full bloom, for there had been no appreciable interval between his request and its fulfillment, no mounting crescendo of "Allô, allô," no pitiful pleas to an obdurate operator of "Ne coupez pas, je vous en prie." My amazement must have been obvious, for he said, with a smile, "The telephone of Saint-Césaire are doubtless under the benign guidance of the ghost of Monsieur Bourseul." I failed to conceal that the significance of this remark eluded me, and with a hint of a rebuke such as might be deserved by someone who confessed to have never heard of Napoleon, he explained with almost palpable pride that Monsieur Charles Bourseul, surely I had not failed to notice his statue, was the illustrious son of Saint-Césaire, who had invented the French telephone. It was profoundly interesting to learn that these instruments, hanging in apparent innocence from their little brass hooks and too fragile to receive the impact of thwarted venom, were not merely a malign sport of the species, but an entirely different breed. The progenitor of this hydra died in 1912, yet his effigy has never been burned on a pyre of telegraph poles, nor his moppet sold with an outsized packet of pins. Instead, his statue, venerable in a frock coat, commands the Place Gambetta, opposite the establishment where I was gently taught, earlier schooling had occurred in other parts of the lot, the more advanced moves of another gambit in Gaelic communication, how to play post office. Though sharing a name with a frolic designed for children's parties, this game is suitable only for alert adults. And as a preliminary to learning the basic ploys, one must realize that the most dominant and splendid characteristic of the French is that they are individualists, which is why the Germans, dedicated to the dreadful dogma of unquestioning obedience, are their natural enemies. So a French bureaucrat whose fundamental instincts revolt against acting as a unit instead of as a person, conceals his feelings either by acting like a bully or being purposefully inefficient. So unless you are by nature patient or have an hour to spare, buy stamps, as the French do, at a tobacconist, easily identifiable by the red spindle-shaped sign which represents a carrot of tobacco. But should you venture into a post office, remember that of the 4 or 5 officials in sight, only one is likely to have sufficient herd instinct to be a bureaucrat at heart. This joiner is instantly recognizable, for she, the joiner, is nearly always female, is the only person on the far side of the counter who is doing any work. The other girls are too busy manicuring their nails or exchanging provocative remarks with the male employees to have time to notice the customers. There are likely to be a few dispirited people standing, like sheep waiting to be dipped, behind an old man who's trying to draw his pension. He is offering a bundle of dog-eared papers to the joiner, who either cannot or will not explain to him that as he has mislaid the necessary card, he must fill up a form before he can be issued with a duplicate. Join this hurdle and you are lost, or an hour is lost, which you might have employed more pleasantly. You must try to catch the eye of one of the individualists who are amusing each other out of earshot. This requires practice. The tyro is unlikely to produce any result. It is now that you must steadfast resist the urge to raise your voice, to tap on the counter with a coin, to fidget while muttering audibly under your breath, or even grosser signs of exasperation such as staring at the clock or winding your wristwatch. Any such gestures would not only be discourteous, they would slow down the whole process, for everyone, including the joiner, would stop to stare at you in astonishment. And why should they not stare? For they knew and will assume you have forgotten this basic fact, that time is not money. To be niggardly with time is the most unforgivable form of meanness. Argue over a franc if you must, and you may expect to be respected if not loved, but to be parsimonious about minutes is to become an outcast, and to be treated as such. To cover your chagrin at the failure of your inexpert eye-catching exercises, enter into conversation with the other customers. Should shiners have crammed your mouth with sawdust, pretend that they are fellow passengers in a railway carriage which has stopped alarmingly long in a tunnel, and so discover it to be your duty to make some jolly remark that may relieve the tension. If it is so early in the morning that no sip of cognac, no sup of wine has yet awakened the French words, which are oversleeping in some crevice of your mind, make friends with a dog. There's almost certain to be a dog here, and I have seen the most aloof of poodles become ecstatic when addressed as bon dog by a retired colonel in tweeds. If you're not a dog lover, you must make do by ingratiating yourself with a child. Having by now established yourself as one of the rare beings whose foreignness is not a stigma of the potential invader, but a symbol of quality, such as is borne by Scottish cashmere sweaters or penknives from Sheffield, the assembled company suddenly recognize that it is their duty to see that the courtesies of France are lavished upon you. By some subtle process of intuition, similar to the one which causes a murmuration of starlings to alter course, the counter is now lined with employees eager to serve you. The latest issue of stamps is produced from a drawer under the counter, for stamps are changed as often as Parisienne changes her hats. Parisiennette changes her hat. It is expected that you will take thought before deciding which picture you prefer, as though you were brooding over a wine list, so not to spoil the game by hurrying, or be put off your stroke by imagining that someone in the crowd behind you might have a train to catch. It is now only necessary to arrange your purchases in a decorative pattern on the envelope. It is more difficult to do this on a postcard without obscuring the address. To thank all the employees who, although they have not actually served you, have provided an audience, and to shake hands with each member of the admiring, if envious, crowd. Having now passed your first test with flying colours, you may on a later day set yourself the more arduous task of sending a telegram. I will make the problem easier by postulating that there is no one behind the counter save the joiner. To gain her cooperation is not easy, but it can be achieved by using tactics such as would cause a paranoid watchdog to accept you during its owner's absence. When you have at last wrung a reluctant smile from her, a crowd of people surges into the arena. Instantly, her manner becomes glacial, for she sees you as a pupil who has tried to undermine her authority by being winsome with teacher during recess. Angrily, she seizes a telephone and embarks on an incomprehensible argument with an imaginary opponent. The aim is to make you feel guilty of eavesdropping until in some acute embarrassment you shuffle away. If you return to the attack, for now it is open warfare, without first gaining the cooperation of the majority of the audience, it requires no power of déjà vu to forecast what will happen. A. You at last find a telegraph form, which will be in a box labelled something quite different. You decipher the instructions, if both your French and your eyesight are excellent. You fill up the form very clearly and carefully in pencil, as no pen is provided and you have forgotten to bring your own. You tag on to the end of the check and of the queue and wait desperately until at long last you can offer it to the joiner. She adds up the words, tapping each with a pencil and counting out loud. Then she repeats the process as though suspecting that an extra word is hiding and only waiting for her to take her eyes off the rest, so to sidle into a gap and upset her calculations. F. She then asks you in very rapid French at what rate you wish to send it. Le plus vite, you say doggedly, for by now you have been so spendthrift with time that it would be pointless to economize with money. She darts meaning glances at her sycophants which convey regard the terror. Oh dear, I don't know where this stopped. Don't even know why the battery is already draining. I'm going to stop this here and continue this interaction in a French post office later.